We are P5PG, and this term we have been detectives. Our quest was to find out what life was like for people at Titanic, why Titanic was built, who the key players were in its construction, why Titanic was built in the way it was, and most importantly, who is to blame for this awful, tragic disaster. We have been sharing our discoveries with each other, and we would now like to share with you what we know so that you can decide for yourself who was to blame for this disaster.
RMS Titanic is one of the most famous ships ever. Titanic was launched in Belfast on the 31st of May 1911. People wanted to travel more and further. They were hearing stories of what life was like in America. Poorer people here were working very hard, and they thought that if they travelled they could find a better life for themselves and their families. Titanic was built in Belfast. Over 40,000 men were employed by Harland and Wolff, the company that built Titanic. Imagine that. It is a lot of people. Most families would have been dependent on shipbuilding or have something to do with it. Most of them lived in rows of terraced houses around the yard. Rich people often travelled to have a good time or for business.
At the time of the shipbuilding had become relatively safe, and a lot of ordinary people, as well as rich people, could afford to travel on ships. By 1900, the fastest ships were crossing from Europe to America in 5.5 days. There was lots of competition between shipping companies to get as many passengers as possible to pay to travel with them, so they could make lots of money, and that's why Titanic was built. Titanic and the two sister ships were built by the White Star Line. They decided they would build not the fastest ship, but the biggest and the best. Everyone would see how fantastic the ships were and want to travel on them. Passengers travelled in different ways. Rich people wanted to travel in luxury. They wanted the voyage to be an adventure where they would have all the best exciting new things. They travelled in first class. Titanic had a grand staircase in first class, which is thought to be a replica of the Belfast City Hall. Amazing! There was a luxurious restaurant, squash courts, a gymnasium with a Turkish bath and a heated swimming pool filled with salt water. There was a grand promenade where the first-class passengers could walk and spend time together. The best of everything was there. Passengers who travelled in second class were still amazed by how good things were on the Titanic. They still had electric lighting, flushing toilets. Passengers who travelled in second class still had public rooms as well as their cabins, but these were more modest. They had lounges in a library and also a promenade. The poorer people who travelled in third class were still amazed by how good things were on the Titanic. They still had electric lighting, flushing toilets, and regular meals with waiter service. Fantastic! It is important to remember that the first-class passengers were near the top and so closer to the lifeboats. Second class near the rear of the stern and steerage lower down and at the rear.
So, who are the most important people in the construction of the Titanic? All key players. As detectives, we have found out therefore they are J.P. Morgan, who was the main financier of the White Star Line, which was an American company. Bruce Ismay, who's in charge in Harland Wolff, the company who built Titanic. Thomas Andrews, who took over from Alexander Caslow, the one who dropped the plans. Captain E.J. Smith, who was in charge of the Titanic when it set sail.
Titanic set sail from Southampton on the 10th of April 1912, heading for New York, but it did not arrive there. As it travelled over the North Atlantic, it hit an iceberg and the ship sank. The families of those who died and the survivors wanted to know who was to blame for this disaster. We have also tried to work this out. We have thought up questions that we would have liked to ask the four key players.
Please come forward, J.P. Morgan, the financier of the White Star Line.
Question 1.
You and the White Star Line put up the money for the building of Titanic. Why did you spend so much money on things you didn't need, like palm trees and wide promenades? Especially for the first-class passengers, instead of things to make sure the ship was safe, like more lifeboats and making sure it was built properly. You instructed the designer to reduce the number of lifeboats so there could be a larger promenade for the first-class passengers. Why?
No, I didn't. I'm not a designer. I just provided the money. Others were to blame.
Question 2.
I think it would have been better to use your money to make sure that the best quality of materials were being used in the building of Titanic, rather than on fancy wood furniture and things that really didn't matter. Why did you not use better quality materials and things like rivets?
My money was not spent the way I wanted. I told the builders to use good quality materials in the rivets. They didn't listen.
Question 3.
We know that Captain Smith had a great reputation and had been sailing for a long time. When he was working for White Star Line, you put him in charge of the Olympic, one of Titanic's sister ships, and he crashed that. Then why did you put him in charge of the Titanic when it clearly was not safe or right to do that? He was about to retire, for goodness sake.
Captain Smith was an experienced captain. That's why I put him in charge of Titanic. He deserved a second chance and to prove himself again. I didn't know he would take safety risks.
Question 4.
When Captain Smith crashed the Olympic, Titanic was still being built. You allowed parts to be taken from the Titanic to repair the Olympic. This meant the launch of the Titanic was delayed. If you had not allowed this, Titanic would have not crashed into the iceberg. I think you allowed Titanic's parts to be used just so you didn't lose any money from the Olympic being delayed. It is all about the money for you, isn't it? Why did you allow that to happen?
Forget about the money. Money means nothing in life. It's the loss of life that counts. Taking parts from the Olympic doesn't matter. It was Smith's fault for ignoring iceberg warnings from his crew and other ships. He just wanted to get from New York to New York as fast as possible. And he didn't crash into the other ship. The other ship crashed into him.
Question 5.
You just wanted to get as many passengers repairing your ship as possible. You made the ship as fancy as luxurious as you could, but you did not focus on the safety enough. You did not carry out enough tests, and there were not enough lifeboats for everyone. You were putting up the money instead of safety being first. Why did you allow Titanic to set sail when it was clearly not safe?
It was not my job to carry out safety checks. Others, including Captain Smith, were responsible. He should not have set sail if the ship was unsafe and there was not enough lifeboats. I will not be blamed for the captain's mistakes. He overruled me.
Some people say that Titanic sank because of the fault of J.P. Morgan and the White Star Line. Please come forward, Thomas Andrews, designer of the Titanic.
Question 1.
You took over from the Honourable Alexander Carlyle as the designer of Titanic. Carlyle had planned for more lifeboats to be on the ship. Why did you build it without enough lifeboats for all the passengers and crew?
Well, J.P. Morgan was the one that told me to put not as much lifeboats on the deck because of the grand promenades for the first class passengers.
Question 2.
You designed the ship with electronically operated watertight doors controlled from the bridge. These could close quickly and they sealed off the watertight compartments. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. I'm glad I've done that.
Question 3.
You also designed the ship without a watertight deck, so if too much water entered the forward compartments, they would sink lower in the sea and the water would flow over the top into the next compartments. Why did you plan the ship without a watertight deck?
Well, the shipbuilders, they told me not to because, it would... Well, I'm not sure, I can't remember what they said, but they just didn't want me to do that.
Question 4.
Titanic had 50 watertight compartments. The ship could have stayed afloat if 2 compartments next to each other flooded. To be completely watertight, the dividers between the watertight compartments need to go all the way up to the top, to a steel main deck. You did not plan for this. Some of the dividers only went up 2 or 3 decks, and there was no steel lid, so it just was not safe. The watertight compartments, in fact, are not watertight. Why did you design a ship like this?
Well, I tried to, but the shipbuilders, they disagreed as well. Also, so they built the ship without actual watertight compartments.
Question 5.
If the rudder on Titanic had been larger, maybe the captain could have steered the ship away from the iceberg. Why did you design the ship with such a small rudder?
Well, that's the shipbuilder's fault again, because he didn't build the ship with a big enough rudder, and also the captain. I think he was also drinking alcohol, but he could have also steered away from the iceberg.
Some people say that Titanic sank because of the fault of Thomas Andrews, designer of the Titanic. Please come forward, Bruce Ismay of Harland and Wolff. Question 1.
You were in charge of Harland and Wolff, the shipbuilders who built Titanic. You had been building ships for a very long time, and you knew how to do that. Even if you had followed the designs, you should have known it was not safe to build a ship the way it was designed by Thomas Andrews. Why then did you allow the ship to be built without enough lifeboats and spaces for all of the people, or for all of the passengers and crew?
Because Thomas Andrews, he told me to put not as many lifeboats on the Titanic because it'll clatter the deck. So.
Question 2.
You were being paid a set fee for building the ship. You were guaranteed to make a profit. You would have made a profit even if you used cheaper materials. The joints in Titanic were made out of 3 million rivets. Steel was stronger than iron. You used a mixture of both. When Titanic hit the iceberg, the rivets popped and the plates opened up and 6 compartments flooded. The hull was made out of steel, which is brighter at the freezing point of water. Why did you not build Titanic out of various materials so that it was safe?
I thought the rivets were strong enough to hold it, but they weren't. And Thomas Andrews, he told me to put them on, but they weren't really strong enough, so they popped.
Question 3.
You've been building ships for a long time, and you said you're good at it. Why not this ship being built properly in watertight compartments actually the compartment, especially being watertight?
Have you done? Okay. Thomas Andrews, Thomas Andrews, the White Star Line, and the captain. White Star Line told Thomas Andrews to design the things in the middle, not at the top, because all three of them thought it wouldn't have sank. But so I did it, and but it sank. And, yeah.
Question 4. You were on Titanic on the night of the disaster, and you knew about the ice rooms and the shortage of lifeboats and the so-called watertight compartments, but you did not ask the captain to slow down. Why did you not do that?
Because the captain, I told the captain to slow down, but he didn't listen. He just shoved me out the room and went full speed ahead because he wanted to be the fastest to cross the Atlantic, and so he didn't listen. And I saw drinking alcohol and being drunk and playing cards with his friends on the boat.
Some people say that Titanic sank because of the fault of Bruce Ismay of Holland and Wolff. Please come forward, Captain Smith, captain of the Titanic.
Question 1.
You were in charge of Titanic during its maiden voyage, yet you had already crashed the Olympic. Why do you accept the job of being captain when you knew you were not fit to be in charge? If you had not crashed the Olympic, Titanic's voyage would not have been delayed and the disaster would not have happened. You were soon to retire. Had you not done enough?
Well, first of all, I did not crash the Olympic. The Hawk crashed into me, and JP Morgan had asked me to captain the Titanic, so I said, fine, I'll do it.
Question 2.
Surely one of the first things you should have done should have been to make sure the ship was safe. Did you do that? Did you check there was enough lifeboats?
Well, I checked the ship, and I knew the watertight compartments weren't right up for a watertight deck, and that would be Bruce Ismay's fault. And there wasn't enough lifeboats, and Bruce Ismay should have put some more in.
Question 3.
You were the person in charge of the ship when it set sail. Why did you not insist that there was a lifeboat drill and make sure that everyone knew what to do if the ship was going to sink? The crew were not organised for the disaster and did not know how to coordinate the lifeboats and get people into them. The people who were in steerage could not get up to the lifeboats easily, and there were not enough spaces on all the boats for all of them. If you had practiced the drill, more people could have been saved. Why did you not do that?
Well, again, I thought the ship was unsinkable, and so did JP Morgan, Thomas Andrews, and Bruce Ismay. So I didn't think there was any need for a lifeboat drill. And if you're in steerage, there was nowhere else to put them because we had the coolers at the bottom and the kitchens were all about the place. And we couldn't put them anywhere else. And if you're in third class, I couldn't do anything to help you get out quicker.
Question 4.
Titanic had received ice warnings from other ships. It was clearly dangerous. Why did you not insist on Titanic slowing down? It has since been shown if the ship had been going slower, the collision could have been avoided.
Well, if you're going slower, it just means you don't get as much of an impact. It just means it goes through the whole of the ship, and it just takes longer to sink.
Question 5. On the night of the disaster, you had been dining with passengers. Had you been drinking alcohol when you were in charge of the ship in dangerous conditions? Should you not have been with your crew working out how best to steer the ship through the ice?
Well, first of all, I don't like alcohol, Bruce Ismay, and I wasn't playing cards.
and Bruceisme was actually having his tea, and he didn't care about what the ship was doing. He just wanted to go to bed, and I could trust my crew to steer through the ice, and if I went up, I would just miss my tea. I'm allowed to have tea on the ship, or else I'd starve.
Some people say that Titanic sank because of the fault of Captain E.J. Smith, captain of the Titanic. Titanic sank in freezing waters of the Atlantic on the 15th of April 1912. About 1,500 people lost their lives. They were all real people, each with family and friends and their own stories to tell. Over 100 years later, people are still trying to work out how the disaster happened. As detectives, we now each have our own thought, and it is up to each of you to decide for yourself.